okay, parents, your kids are going to turn out just fine.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FOCO. That's FOCO, F-O-C-O. If you are a parent of a child or teen with ADHD, you know how challenging it can be to keep them focused and engaged. FOCO is the all-natural solution for ADHD, whether it's for school, homework, or just everyday activities. FOCO helps your child or teen stay calm and attentive. Before trying prescription drugs like Adderall that can come with harsh side effects, I recommend you try FOCO. Visit ThinkFOCO, that's ThinkFoco, thinkfoco.com for more information. Welcome back to the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. I am Dr. Michael Malobsky, board certified pediatrician, also parent of 7. Here at the Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast, we are trying to help parents sort through the overwhelming amount of information that comes at us from social media and help us understand and help us get to the core of what's really important, hoping to decrease our anxiety about the choices that we make when it comes to parenting and hopefully help you know that your kids will be fine. Remember that Your Kids Will Be Fine can be found in all platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Also, find us at yourkidswillbefine.com, where you can download all the episodes, leave us a comment, leave us a show suggestion. Also, check out the YouTube channel at Your Kids Will Be Fine podcast. Today is part 2 of our discussion of ADHD. As we talked about before, ADD or ADHD is the most common mental health concern that parents come to the office to talk about. And last episode, and I encourage you to check out part 1, we talked all about the presenting signs and symptoms, how they can look different depending on the kid, how many different things that are not ADD can sometimes masquerade as ADD or ADHD symptoms, how to properly get your child evaluated. And today we're going to talk about all of the things that parents can do around ADD or ADHD, whether you're formally diagnosed or whether you even think that your child might have some symptoms. There are lots of things that we can do at home as parents and interventions we can take that can sometimes help. So we're going to go in order. We're going to start with things that are not medicine related that we know help neurocognitive functioning in general and ADHD symptoms specifically. Number 1, at the top of the list is exercise. I know it sounds cliche. We always hear about exercise as a way to help not only ADHD, but depression and anxiety. So it starts to sort of just run by us. But the truth is that exercise is not just a neuromuscular activity. It is a neurocognitive phenomenon. When we exercise, we release neurotransmitters into our brain, into our nervous system that have a significant regulatory component. People who exercise regularly can speak to this. It is not theory. It is proven. It's science. And we know that when you are struggling with emotional regulation and or executive functioning issues, as is the case often with ADHD, exercise, regular movement can significantly help in the absence of any other intervention. That being said, it's really hard to legislate and to dictate activity for our kids. We're not here to crack the whip over their heads and force them into it. It has to be something, especially in a kid with ADHD, it has to be something that they choose to do, has to be something they enjoy. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable and they're not going to stick with it. So exercise, number 1. 2, let's talk about diet. Over the years, there's been an enormous amount of theory and anecdotal discussion about the impact of diet on kids with diagnosed ADHD, whether it's food additives, food coloring, sugar. And the truth is when we study this, and the thing to remember about studies, when people cite a study, and a study shows a finding, it does not mean it's 100% true for every single individual. When studies come out and they show, hey, there's a correlation or there is an association, that means that it's possibly true for a majority of people, but not necessarily true for every single person. So that's important to note. But what definitely is clear when it comes to diet and ADHD is that there isn't any one singular dietary approach that's the same or works for every single person. There is a fair amount of evidence to suggest that decreasing processed foods, decreasing added sugar in the diet have a positive impact. And in terms of the theory as to where that works, one potential theory is that it's because your gut microbiome is healthier. A healthier gut microbiome has a positive impact on our neurocognitive and nervous system functioning. This is emerging as a truth that we are understanding more and more. When it comes to elimination diets, there isn't really a downside except that it's labor intensive and that it can sometimes feel oppressive to your child. But it's worthwhile trying if you really feel that based on your observation, your child definitely has a change or specific sensitivity to particular food additives. But just in general, reducing processed and ultra-processed foods will often improve that on its own. So take that for what it's worth, but definitely just a cleaner diet in general is always going to be a benefit. Let's talk about supplements. Once again, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and a lot of different theories as to which supplements and how. In terms of what evidence shows, evidence-based approach, by far the most important one has to do with omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. These are polyunsaturated fatty acids. There's a definite correlation between increased amounts of these in your diet and improved ADHD symptoms and neurocognitive performance in the absence of any other intervention. So there really doesn't seem to be a downside to that. So for sure, supplementing omega-3 fatty acids, especially in magnesium form that crosses the blood-brain barrier, like magnesium glycinate, which we know improves neurocognitive balance, sleep function, I think for sure helps. And there is definitely a fair amount of evidence that a broad-based micronutrient multivitamin supplement also has benefit. Once again, these things have very few downsides. So for sure, these are things that anybody could add to their routine if they either have the diagnosis or they think their child might have symptoms. Next, sleep hygiene. No matter what neurocognitive or emotional issue that your child is working on, better sleep, more consistent sleep is always going to help. Sleep hygiene is important. When I talk about sleep hygiene, I talk about the set of habits and routines and structure around maximizing healthy sleep. That includes making sure you're getting plenty of exercise during the day, trying to get natural sunlight in your eyes, especially in the first part of the day, to improve your circadian rhythm and your internal clock. Being intentional about when you turn off blue light and high definition screens leading up to bedtime. I always tell my family, especially if your child is struggling with sleep or might have ADD, try to give it a 60 to 90 minute buffer, which allows your brain to reset. There's a fair amount of evidence about doing something different with your brain during that time to improve transition to sleep, specifically reading for pleasure. Here's the thing, if you've ever worked or hung out with a kid with ADD, reading for pleasure is usually not at the top of their list of things they like to do, but still, sleep hygiene is highly important. There is a fair amount of evidence, and if you look this up, you'll see about behavior therapy and executive function coaching. All of those are great. Cognitive behavioral therapy certainly helps kids with distorted beliefs about themselves and about being worthy and being enough, and ADHD certainly can affect that. Executive functioning coaching helps kids with techniques, especially in the academic setting, about maximizing their strengths and helping to overcome some of their weaknesses when it comes to handling academic load. However, those things are expensive, and depending on where you live, they may not be highly available, but it's worth mentioning. Let's move now to at least the basic understanding of ADHD medicine. So you've considered that your child might have this, you got fully and properly evaluated, and also looked at other things that might mimic ADHD, things like dyslexia, learning disabilities, anxiety, depression, obstructive sleep or sleep dysfunction. All that's been sort of figured out. And you and your doctor think that medicine might be a benefit. So let's quickly just talk about the 3 types of medicines for ADHD. The oldest and longest used medicine for attention deficit disorder is methylphenidate. Methylphenidate is a stimulant. Brand name is Ritalin, and it comes in many, many different forms, both short and long acting. If your child, about 75% of kids in my experience will respond positively to a methylphenidate stimulant with good benefit and minimal side effects. The second class of stimulant medicines are things that we commonly know as amphetamines, although not the amphetamines we normally think of when we use that word. Those are just chemically different from methylphenidate. And the difference between the methylphenidate class and the amphetamines, examples of amphetamine medicines are Adderall and Vyvanse. What methylphenidate seems to do is that it decreases the reabsorption of certain neurotransmitters in the brain and to make them slowly increase levels and more available for use in the ADHD pathway. Those are things like norepinephrine and certainly some dopamine. And the amphetamine class, things like Vyvanse and Adderall, seem to increase production and push more out. And so they both accomplish similar things, but in slightly different ways. Which medicine your child responds to is usually individual. There's usually some family history there. Most practitioners will start with something in the methylphenidate class. We'll switch them if either your child doesn't respond or has side effects more on one than the other. Both classes of stimulants have issues. There's no question. Lots of families I know would like to try everything else before they try stimulants. The first most prominent issues that go along with stimulant medicine is it can disrupt sleep. It can trigger tics. It can trigger mood issues, make your kids more anxious. It can cause GI issues, make it really hard to eat and suppress your appetite, which can make them feel worse and affect their energy. So these are all potential side effects. And with proper management of medicine and being very cautious about how medicine is dosed and advanced, a lot of them can be avoided. But they're still there, and some kids can't tolerate stimulants at all. The third class of medicine are what we call the non-stimulant medicines. They go under the names of Strattera, Qelbree, Guanfacine. They work in different pathways, overlapping some of the same neurochemical effects. Qelbree and Strattera work similar to an SSRI or an antidepressant medicine. Instead of serotonin, it works in the norepinephrine pathway. Guanfacine works in a totally different receptor altogether, and some kids for whom executive functioning or impulsivity or hyperactivity is less of an issue, but more emotional regulation is an issue. Some kids do well with that. So that's a brief overview of medicine. Please ask lots of questions with regards to your medicine treatment and how it's going to be approached. My approach has always been you start at the lowest possible dose and you slowly increase to assess effect, assess side effects, and it usually takes about a month for my patients to kind of find what works for them if we decide collaboratively to start medicine. The last thing I want to talk about are newer products and newer developments in the area of intervention and treatment or management of ADHD symptoms. For those of us who spend a lot of time in the nutrition space and the integrative medicine space, there's a whole class of supplements that are commonly known as nootropics. What they are supplements, plant-based, often natural, that enhance our neurocognitive performance, nootropics. You'll see things like sold like Alpha Brain if you've ever run into that, things like that. Well, there is a product that I'm very excited about, something that I've been trying out myself and in my home with my child who has ADHD, called FOCO, F-O-C-O. FOCO is a product that is composed of some very, very safe, naturally derived ingredients, certain amino acids that have to do with improved neurocognitive performance, attention, natural source of caffeine, and some plant-based derivatives that have to do with improving certain neurotransmitter levels, like acetylcholine, which is a key chemical, a key neurotransmitter for neurocognitive performance in the brain. So FOCO is safe to use in children and adolescents. I have seen it one by itself improve ADHD symptoms in conjunction with these other interventions we talked about: diet, exercise, sleep hygiene, nutrition, all of that. I've also seen it work in kids who are already on ADHD medicine, who are generally doing well, and used in conjunction with that to decrease the amount of medicine that they're on. So this is a really exciting product. You can find it online at, I think, thinkfoco.com. And once again, the product is FOCO. If you're interested in looking it up, you can also find information about it on the website at yourkidswillbefine.com. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was informative. Please don't forget to find us at all the platforms where you get podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel at Your Kids Will Be Fine Podcast, and yourkidswillbefine.com. Looking forward to next week.